From
Mr.
my
Becker, you made a really stupid bet that went bad, didn't you?
Senator,
And the taxpayers of America had to pick up the tab for your stupidity, didn't they? For being here, Mr. Becker. When interest rates go up, the price of government bonds, especially long-term, long maturity government bonds, goes down, doesn't it?
yes,
And you don't have to be Einstein's cousin to know that, do you?
no, you don't.
Okay. Now, your bank had 55% of its assets invested in government bonds, didn't it?
Roughly, yes.
And the Federal Reserve raised interest rates, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
And the value of your assets went down dramatically, didn't they?
Yes, it did.
Okay. And you didn't have hedges, did you?
Senator, as previously mentioned, the decision around hedges was made by our Asset Liability Committee.
Mr. Becker, you were the CEO of the bank. You didn't have hedges, did you?
Senator, there were hedges that were put in place, but I don't recall the details around when they were put in place.
You're the CEO and you had 55% of your assets in government bonds, and you don't know whether you were hedged or not?
Senator, as previously mentioned, I don't have access to my SVB documents, so
Well, I
don't
know that, and I wasn't CEO. You weren't hedged. Now, if you'd bought those hedges, that would have cut into your profits, wouldn't it?
Senator, I don't know the details of the decisions that the team were evaluating.
But if you bought a hedge, the hedge cost money, and it would have decreased your profits, wouldn't it? Do hedges cost money?
Yes, they do.
And so if you bought hedges, you'd have less money, right?
Senator, it depends upon, yes, they would cost money, but it depends upon how the
And if
hedges were
you'd made less money, that would have affected your bonus, wouldn't it?
Senator, our compensation was predominantly long-term in nature. And so I know there's been lots of discussions about compensation being short-term.
Mr. Becker, you made a really stupid bet that went bad, didn't you?
Senator,
And the taxpayers of America had to pick up the tab for your stupidity, didn't they?
Senator, there were a series of events, unprecedented events that occurred that led us to where we are today.
No, this wasn't unprecedented. This was bone deep, down to the marrow, stupid. You put all your eggs in one basket. You put all your eggs in one basket. And unless you were living on the International Space Station, you could see that interest rates were rising and you weren't hedged.
And this was the moment when Senator John Kennedy, in open sunlight in the formal air of Senate inquiry, looked directly into the face of a former bank CEO who presided over the failure of Silicon Valley Bank, and said the quiet part none of them ever say out loud. You made a really stupid bet that went bad, didn't you? There are hearings where the language is evasive, sanitized, choreographed, softened, drenched in euphemism. This was not that hearing. This moment was raw. This moment was surgical. This moment was the stripping away of every layer of corporate narrative protection the modern financial class hides inside. Kennedy walked the CEO down the most basic chain of reality in banking and interest rates, one that every college sophomore in Econ 101 understands, one that any homeowner with a mortgage understands, one that any retiree with a treasury bill understands, one that every bond trader on earth lives and breathes every hour of every market day. When interest rates go up, the price of long-duration government bonds goes down. It is not theoretical. It is not exotic. It is not obscure. It is the foundational rule of modern finance. And yet this bank, one of the most sophisticated venture banks ever built, put over half of its assets into long-dated government bonds without hedging, without protection, without even the most basic shield against the most predictable rate cycle in decades. And when Kennedy asked the CEO if he even knew if they had hedges or not, He said he didn't recall. That is where Washington and the American public heard the seam split open. Because what Kennedy did next, without ever raising his voice, was walk through the motive structure. He forced the CEO to admit, implicitly, the reason the hedges weren't purchased. They cost money, they cut into profit, and if they cut into profit, they cut into compensation. That is the real scandal, not the collapse, not the panic, not the bailout, but that the person at the top was allowed to behave as if consequences didn't exist, because the risk was never fully his to bear. If the upside flowed to him, and the downside could be socialized into the public, then the incentive architecture becomes a mathematical machine for moral hazard. Kennedy weaponized arithmetic as moral indictment. "You put all your eggs in one basket," he said. "You made a really stupid bet that went bad." And the most violent line of all, "And the taxpayers of America had to pick up the tab for your stupidity, didn't they?" This is where the American people must pay attention, because this hearing was not just a post-mortem of one bank failure. It was the X-ray of a governing philosophy that has defined the last 20 years of crisis. Socialized risk, privatized reward, a system where the powerful get to gamble with public downside because they know government is structurally incapable of letting the crash hurt the system. Kennedy's fury was not theatrical fury, it was systemic fury. It was the rage of a country asked to pay for consequences it never consented to create. This CEO wanted to defend his failure as unprecedented events. But it wasn't unprecedented, it wasn't unknowable, it wasn't a black swan. It was the most predictable rate environment shift the modern West has ever had. The Fed told everyone, months, years, loudly, aggressively, publicly. They said they would raise rates to combat inflation. They said it repeatedly. They said it early. They said it constantly. And still, this bank behaved like gravity had been suspended. And the fact that the CEO can come into this room later and claim the risk was unforeseeable is the exact moral sickness that has rotted the accountability DNA of the elite financial tier. Because what Kennedy exposed, in plain language and plain logic, is this: there is no capitalism without risk. There is no market discipline when the losses can be bailed out. There is no integrity in a financial system where the people who make the bets can decline to remember the hedging decisions later. This is where the stakes elevate beyond one bank. This is about whether America still demands accountability at the top. Not symbolic accountability, not PR apology accountability. Real accountability. Accountability that costs. Because if a CEO can sit in that chair under oath and claim he doesn't know whether half of his balance sheet was hedged, then we have reached a level of elite casualness with risk that is incompatible with the survival of a republic. There is a reason that moment hit the internet. There is a reason that clip will be replayed for years. It wasn't comedy. It wasn't dunking. It was a single senator regrounding this country in reality, in arithmetic, in consequence. He forced America to remember that the laws of finance are not optional. You cannot legislate your way out of math. You cannot spin your way out of duration exposure. You cannot PR your way out of risk when the sheet collapses. This was a moral moment. This was accountability trying to resurrect itself inside the rot. The American people are starving for more moments like this. moments where someone inside power is willing to speak to power directly, without fear of rudeness, without fear of offense, without fear of elite discomfort. Because democracy cannot survive if our governing class becomes structurally risk-blind, and democracy cannot endure if the powerful can make stupid bets that the powerless must pay for. This is the Congress Brief. Subscribe, stay awake, and do not look away.